Hello there. Welcome back to Understanding Design. Last time we spoke about design for society. Today's topic is design for sustainability. To discuss this, we have with us Gitanjali Sachdev, faculty at the Srishti Institute of Art, Design and Technology at Bangalore. Good to have you here, Gitanjali.
Thanks, Nina.
The concept of sustainability has become increasingly relevant in all spheres of living. It plays a key role in addressing environmental and social concerns, which are critical today. Let's take a closer look. Gitanjali, do explain to us the concept of sustainability and what has design got to do with it?
Sustainability has to do with being environmentally conscious, but it's also much more than that. It also has to do with social equity and economic development. It implies meeting one's own needs without compromising the ability to meet the needs of the future generation. Sustainability really applies to all kinds of design, product design, textile design, furniture design, systems and services design. My background is in visual communication, but I trained in pedagogy, and that's what I do at Srishti. I teach art and design. And really, because sustainability has become such a critical concept today and it's so relevant, you have to bring it into all kinds of design, whether it's course design or, like I said, the earlier genres of design, product, systems and services design.
Tell us more.
Okay, so how does sustainability relate to design? What's the relationship and how do you bring the idea in? It can be an underpinning to the design you do. It has certain core principles that if you apply to design, it shapes your environment and your society in particular ways. So at the end of this course, what I'd really like to do is for students to be able to evaluate how good or bad a design is based on the criteria of sustainability that they apply to their work. And I'm going to talk about a few designers who've deployed the concept in their work and show some videos that we looked at while we were discussing the idea. So Nina, I've been talking to some of my colleagues at Srishti and around the areas of sustainability. There's a gentleman by the name of Ravi Mani. He's a sustainable development consultant in the areas of architecture and energy solutions. And he teaches our undergraduate students courses on sustainability. And I'd like to share with you some of the videos he shared with me and some of his ideas.
Oh yeah, let's see.
The conventional approach to product design or manufacturing used to be focused primarily on the economic factors, which were cost, quality, and lead time. How much does this product cost? At what quality level should we pitch it in the market? And how long will it take to produce the product and also to manufacture it and ship it to the customers? But typically, the rate at which materials were consumed or how the waste was being processed going back into the environment was not a major part of the consideration. Because the rate of consumption became really very high compared to the rate at which nature can regenerate these resources, sustainability became a very important factor to consider in product design. So sustainability in terms of responsible consumption and also the waste management became a central core concept to address in product design.
So really when doing design for sustainability, there are three lenses which a designer needs to look at. One is environmental factors, two is economic factors, and three is socio-cultural factors.
That's not very hard to remember.
So let's watch a really well-known video. It's called The Story of Stuff, and some of you may have seen it already.
I love The Story of Stuff. I think all of us need to watch it every 6 months just to remind ourselves of so many things that we don't think about. Annie Leonard went on to make more such videos like The Story of Solutions and others on consumerism, the true cost of bottled water.
These are really things we cannot not afford to think about, especially when we design for sustainability. We have to be conscious about the planet's limited resources and focus on materials and processes that aim for zero waste. And we have to think about how we change the way we produce and consume, and how we distribute, how we recycle. And this is really where all the 3 R's come in.
The 3 R's: reduce, recycle, reuse.
Exactly. The Story of Stuff was made in 2009, and things are even worse today for sure, because even though the video was made for a US context, it applies equally so for our environment today. We are losing natural resources like forest cover at top speed. Our industries are polluting air, water, and soil. Tribal populations are being displaced by corporations that have no right to that land.
In India also, the economic model has been largely wasteful in terms of being a linear model. You take resources from nature and you design these products, make them and ship them to the customers, and it has a certain planned duration of use. After that, it needs to be replaced by other products. So the consumption is largely wasteful, and a lot of the end-of-life products just end up in the environment, not in a form that nature can process it, and therefore it becomes disruptive in some ways and also destructive to the environment. So that's where I think the conscious designer needs to think more in terms of sustainability and be more sensitive to the damage caused to the environment. So here we are not only talking about responsible consumption of resources. Can those products be designed in such a way that some parts of it can go directly into nature and be processed by nature, and some other parts of it can be reused or repurposed or recycled, so that the waste stream is reduced and it doesn't disrupt the natural cycle. And therefore the outputs are recycled, reused in such a way that it closes the loop.
Yes, the purely economic approach did not look at closing the loop between the inputs they were using and the waste being generated.
Right, and it's not as if suddenly the old way of doing things has vanished. Design for sustainability in the contemporary industrial context is yet to become widespread. It's not a way of thinking that exists at the moment. And it exists only in some pockets where people are becoming environmentally conscious and socially conscious. But largely people are not concerned about the future of the planet that we're leaving behind.
Where people don't care or don't care to know, there is an attempt to bring in laws that regulate these matters.
Yeah, but there are always people opposing these laws and are looking for loopholes that may allow evasion to some extent. And in fact, legal measures may not always have the measured or the required effect that we're looking for. I think it requires a change in thinking, and in the way we think about the planet and resources. And in fact, a recent move in sustainability has been towards lean thinking.
Lean thinking became a very important aspect to consider, especially on the economic factors of cost, quality and lead time. This was largely successful for many of the Japanese car manufacturers, grabbing a huge market share because of the way they design their products using lean thinking. These key principles guide us when applying lean techniques and tools, and it became a new way of thinking for both product design and for manufacturing.
So Tesco is one of the largest supermarket chains in the UK, and Terry Leahy, who is the former CEO of Tesco, explains how lean thinking is applied for sustainability in the context of the chain's operations. And it's a huge supply and distribution network that links the farmer with the home consumer.
That's fascinating. This is how the idea of sustainability gets built, not just into the environmental approach, but also the economic approach.
Yeah, and the Dabbawalas are a great example of the economic approach and where sustainability can be applied. The Dabbawalas are very famous in Bombay. They have a famous system of markings which brings food in dabbas to thousands of office goers from their homes. And it's a great systems design, and where these guys never get the dabbas mixed up, even though it's a huge and complex operation. But even they've become very alert to sustainability issues with regards to the food waste generated in the dabbas.
Yes, that too is a great example of a closed loop system. So we've looked at environmental factors and economic factors. And do you remember what the third factor of sustainability was? That's right, the socio-cultural factor. Would you like to tell us about that one, Gitanjali?
It's wonderful that designers are becoming more aware of the communities they're impacting with their work and, the social impact of their design. And for this point, actually, I would like to share what Ravi has to say.
So another important aspect to design for sustainability is keeping in mind the social and cultural factors. How do we include local communities, local groups of people, and make them active stakeholders in the product that we are designing? Now in this, I'd like to talk about livelihood, especially with respect to the craft communities, which is something that I feel quite strongly about. We in India have the luxury of a whole diversity of crafts and traditions that have been in play for many hundreds of years. And they come from a context where they have actually incorporated sustainable design into their products by way of using natural materials, also being able to regenerate whatever materials that they may be using from nature. So they have a certain culture of doing that also. So if we can tie that up with some of the mainstream products that are being designed, then it creates a much more steady livelihood stream for some of these craftspeople who are heavily skilled, because unfortunately in our circumstances right now, the craft community is working in parallel to the other economy. And what is happening is many of these craftspeople are subsisting on something anywhere from 1,500 to 2,000 rupees a month. So how can we as designers be very conscious of the fact that we can produce some of these products using their skills and improving the elegance of the products, but at the same time creating a livelihood stream for them which is steady, and they can also improve their lot. So as an example for design for sustainability, keeping the social and cultural factors in mind, Daily Dump is an excellent example.
So the Daily Dump was innovated by the designer Poonam Bir Kasturi, who was concerned about household waste management. So she explored ways to get householders to compost at home with organic wastes like vegetable peels and leftover food into terracotta pots.
Terracotta? Why isn't that fragile?
Well, terracotta is porous and so it controls the excessive water that is discharged during decomposition. And using terracotta provided the potters with a steady income, while simultaneously helping urban families to do their bit to solve the city's waste problem. So the system actually changed the behavior of families and entire residential areas in disposing of their kitchen waste.
So there's the third lens where the socio-cultural aspect of sustainability gets addressed. Daily Dump has partners in various cities and their website gives more details.
Well, I'm sure you touched upon some of these things in your Design and Society module.
We did, but it's always good to have a fresh perspective for a broader and even a deeper understanding.
I have some examples of design for sustainability from the perspective of engineering.
Oh, that's very useful.
So for civil and structural engineers, the central question is, how can waste be reused in construction, right? So a good example is fly ash bricks, which Ravi explained really well.
So fly ash is actually a waste that is generated from the coal thermal power plants. And rather than discarding the waste into the environment and causing more damage to the environment, if that can be used in another industry, then it closes a loop. Now we've created also these fly ash bricks, which are very useful in infrastructure projects in the built environment. So civil engineers and structural engineers would be interested in materials like this, which can take waste out of another industry and make a very useful product for the built environment industry. So this way the loop is completely closed, not necessarily in that particular industry, but from one to the other. This is another way of making sure that you're closing the loops in sustainable design.
Then there's the concept of effective microorganisms or EMs, and chemical engineers would be interested in this. So here's a bottle of EM that Ravi uses in his home. He adds it to the jaggery solution.
And it's easy on the hands.
Yeah, it's easy on the hands. There's some great examples of design that address sustainability issues on the Index website.
This is a group that promotes sustainable design by sponsoring competitions and giving awards to the best entries. You'll find this link among the resources on the course platform, so you can browse it later at leisure.
And there are a couple more stories of design for sustainability that I'd like to share.
You have the floor, Gitanjali, but I have a request first. We have been working with the example of a chair in every module, applying the design topic of the module to the chair. Could you help us think about design for sustainability with the chair as an example?
Sure. As my colleague Janak Mistry says, design today is not about creating new and charming products or one-of-a-kind products. It's more about how the products are manufactured, who manufactures them, who will use them, and what are the resources going into making them. So when we look at a chair, he asks, how could we look at it in terms of contemporary conversations surrounding design and sustainability? And what are these actually? When we say what makes a sustainably designed chair, the whole question is posed keeping in mind a time frame. Will the product last a lifetime? And what about after its lifetime? The life of a product is much longer than what you think it is. So when you use a chair and when it stops functioning as a chair, like you say, na tang toot gayi hai, right? We need to think, where is the product going after its useful life, right? So he urges you not to design only up to a certain point. Don't just make things market ready. You need to go beyond the market when conceptualizing the design of a product. So the chair could be handed over as an heirloom. It could acquire value as it becomes older. It could be a disposable chair or a biodegradable chair. And it doesn't create any harm to the environment when its life is over. These are essentially the questions you need to ask when you think about designing a chair at the onset.
So what would you advise our students about this?
So a good exercise that Janak does in his classes is to ask students to visualize if they can make a chair that acquires a totally different function after its life, So for example, if you think about a toilet commode and when it breaks, you can convert it into a planter and grow your plants in it, right? So how can you incorporate this kind of thinking into, say, the design of a chair? How would you do it? So if you had to think of a chair and how it could be used when you had to dispose of it, what kind of design thinking skills would you deploy? Actually, another exercise he does is to look at how to inculcate the concept of value into what you design. The example he shared with me was that your cat sits on a chair a lot, right? This chair that you've designed with all your
user studies,
aesthetic sense, and your cat sits on it and loves it. So, or somebody you loved a lot died on the chair, right? So the value of the chair increases for you. Imagine how a chair would increase in value for your customer. So if you're as a student, you're designing a chair, try to conceive of these ways in which a chair could become valuable.
So its life is extended, kind of.
Yeah, and then design the chair. So, you need to embed a time frame in your design. And this is something you have to suggest in your design for the product.
Anybody else you can think of?
Okay, at Srishti we have something called the Frugal Design Lab that's run by Sudipto Das Gupta and his wife Nandini Das Gupta. And actually Sudipto spoke to me about the idea of embodied energy or embedded energy. For example, if you buy a cane chair, right, and you think you're really happy because you think you're buying this biodegradable product that is good for the environment. I mean, you're happy about it. But he says you can't just think about products in that fashion. You have to think of you have to calculate the embodied energy within that chair. And that means calculating what it took for the chair to come to you from where it was produced and manufactured. How many, what was its carbon footprint, how many miles did it travel, etc., etc. And that actually is the cost of the chair embodied within it.
Do you have any models from other related disciplines?
Janak mentioned an example from architecture. You must have seen how after major disasters, the government builds housing for, people affected. Such housing schemes usually don't involve local residents in the planning. And this often leads to houses that the locals don't feel at home in. These places get neglected afterwards and the project becomes totally unsustainable because it can't be maintained by the community.
I do recall something like this happened in Kutch after the big earthquake of 2001.
No, this is in 2004 after the tsunami. The architect Durganand Balsavar was commissioned to design new homes in Tamil Nadu in the Nagapattinam district. And he insisted on getting the local people involved right from the beginning. He wanted, the local people to feel a sense of ownership in the homes that came up, that were designed. It was not very easy because the donor agencies and the local residents obviously had very different views on what needed to be designed in their ideal home. So the house design that the community wanted had a shaded veranda in front that was facing the street, and which also housed a kitchen. They wanted their kitchen to be in the veranda of the front. And the donor agencies were completely opposed to this, and even Balsavar didn't agree with this. For them, the ideal kitchen didn't have have the kitchen on the porch. It was inside the house and it was closed. Balsavar then, I think, understood that this design solution was something that reflected the villagers' way of life, and so he went with that.
He included the people in the design.
Yeah, and it was a very participatory process. The larger point was that when participative design ensures that the design sustains longer, because those who are invested in using it participate in the making of it, they care about it, and it lives with them far longer.
So people were involved in the design planning as well?
Yes, they were even involved in the construction. They made bricks, did masonry, carpentry and electrical work. The building process provided the people with livelihoods, and they felt a keen sense of ownership in the project. The emotional investment of the local people translated into sustainability, as shown by their care for the buildings long after the design team had left.
So this is another example where the socio-cultural aspect was taken into account.
Yeah.
Gitanjali, what about the UN Sustainable Development Goals? How would those inform design practice today?
Well, we all know that some of the key global issues today are poverty, climate change, and the loss of natural habitats, as well as armed conflicts all over. At the national level, we have to deal with issues such as hunger, lack of education and health facilities, and growing violence in the name of religion.
So what happened at the United Nations?
Well, in September 2015, almost 200 countries met at the United Nations and adopted a set of goals to end poverty, to protect the planet, and to ensure prosperity at a global scale. Around the world, there was a demand for leadership on poverty, inequality, and on climate change. So in order to turn these demands into actions, world leaders adopted an agenda for sustainable development. Their objective was to produce a set of universally applicable goals that balances the three dimensions of sustainable development: the environmental, social, and economic. These Sustainable Development Goals, also known as SDGs, unite us together to make a positive change for both people and the planet.
For example?
One of the goals involves taking urgent action to combat climate change and its impacts. Another goal is to build resilient infrastructure, promote inclusive and sustainable industrialization, and foster innovation. There are 17 such important goals,
which you can find on our course platform in the reference tab.
Well, these goals for sustainable development offer us powerful directives for doing design. Design for sustainability enables us to make the quality of our lives and that of future generations so much better.
That gives us a lot of hope. Thank you, Gitanjali. Some of you may be feeling overwhelmed by the problems of the world, but don't be discouraged. We are now more than halfway through this course and hope you've all been learning more and more about design and seeing the world around you with new eyes. Next time, our topic will be design for industry, and we will continue to explore sustainability practices there.